So today we're going to be talking about burnout again. Uh, really important topic, not only for the business place, but also in personal life, even specifically with regards to COVID and what's happening today. So burnout doesn't actually always need to be within the workplace. It could also be in other situations as well. And that could actually be pretty alarming because outside of work, you want to be in a place that's actually a lot more safer and relaxing for all of us. I mean, we can't always be in a mode where we're constantly alert and, trying to kind of like attack the day in terms of productivity or meeting our goals. So, kind of a summary, last time we talked about burnout. Burnout can pretty much happen where you're going from a safe space to collapse. And when you collapse, you're pretty much simulating death, mostly for, as a survival strategy against predators. We're pretty much simulating almost death, and it takes anywhere from at least 3 months to much, much longer to recover from that. So one of the solutions is to make sure that we tell good stories about ourselves, to relax, to kind of avoid that situation from getting to a place that's pretty dire. So today, we're going to talk about how that could happen outside of work, which is actually interesting because I actually don't know how that happens outside of work, but Banu will be able to explain that. So I'll pass it to her.
Yeah, I think when we look around right now, we see people during the COVID shelter at home kind of lifestyle. Some people are thriving, but some people are having really hard time. And maybe we can start talking about one can burn out from what's going on in this kind of lifestyle. So is it possible to burn out from pandemic lifestyle? I think the answer is yes. And I know personally people who are having really hard time struggling. And again, last time we talked about burnout, we used the term lightly. In my mind, there's two kind of burnout that I gave the analogy of the term depression. Like I can say today I feel depressed these days, which doesn't mean that I'm clinically depressed. I'm just having low mood, and I can feel burned out, right? Which I think what we are trying to say is my internal resource level is low. Mm-hmm. That's what we're trying to say when we say, I feel a little burnout right now. But then the clinical level burnout would be, that's when kind of game over, like I cannot deal with this and you need to time off, like that's more serious. But today I'm going to be talking about more the lighter definition of burnout, which means I'm low on my internal resources. So last time I gave the analogy of these life energy bars that you would see in a video game. Mm-hmm. That would be in green, and if you go lower, it may get to red, and if you finish, you lose a life, right? In a game. So, and usually in the games, there are things that you can do that replenishes that life energy level. Mm-hmm. And then you get a hit, you fall, something happens, and it drains that life energy level. So there are things you can do to increase it. There are things that happen to you that decreases it, right? Or the things you do that decreases it. So I believe we have the same thing with our internal resources. When certain things happen, challenging things happen, it may drain our resources. We're overworked. It may drain our resources, and there are things that replenishes those resources. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about some of the common themes that drains people's resources and what kind of those factors are present in pandemic-related lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah.
So I think one is very obvious. There is a pandemic outside that can kill you, right? There's a virus outside that we have to protect ourselves from, right? So for our brain, there are only 3 different types of situation. Our brain looks at the environment and scans the environment for dangers, and it gives 3 different kind of makes 3 different kind of judgments. It says either it's safe, dangerous, or life-threatening.
Yeah.
Right? And according to that decision, if it says it's safe, it activates one system of our autonomic nervous system, one like sub-branch of it. It's ventral vagal system, which is our also social engagement system. That part of the nervous system helps us socially engage with each other. That regulates communication, how we relate to other people, if we are going to hear human voices or not. And if it says the environment is dangerous, then we activate the sympathetic branch of the nervous system, which gives us the fight or flight response. Last time we talked about that too. What happens when you're in fight or flight? And if it says it's a life-threatening situation, then we go to dorsal vagal and then we show the collapse response. So everything depends on your brain's judgment if it's safe, dangerous, or life-threatening, right? And the brain has this 24/7 surveillance system called neuroception. Even when you're sleeping, your brain is monitoring the environment for dangers. It's not a conscious process. So you do it subconsciously all the time. It doesn't shut off.
Yeah, I hear that happens mostly when you're sleeping in a different situation. Like when you travel and you sleep, you're looking for threats than if you stayed in one place for a long period of time.
Yeah, like an unfamiliar situation creates a higher threat probability for the brain, so it's more vigilant in unfamiliar places. Also, new mothers, because they need to monitor the environment for dangers. Now they have to protect the baby or kid. So mothers' sleep becomes very light, and they will wake up in anything like small sound because their brains are more vigilant. They are trying to make sure that things are safe for the kid as well. So anyway, so this is an unconscious, involuntary response if our brain decides it's safe, dangerous, or life-threatening.
And what's this called again? You mentioned, what's this?
Neuroception.
Neuroception?
Ception. Like perception.
Got it.
But neuroception, and perception is different because perception is a conscious process, right? Perception works with the conscious mind. I see you, I perceive you. Neuroception does not require consciousness.
I see. It's very conscious, subconscious. Got it. And it's assessing threat level while you sleep mainly, or does it happen when you're not?
24/7, nonstop.
Got it.
It's always running that. It always tries to determine if the environment is safe, dangerous, or life-threatening. So obviously, if there's a virus outside that can make us sick and kill us, what do you think the brain thinks about the environment outside? Right? Or things that come in from outside. So this can create a lot of sympathetic activation, which is fight or flight response, right? Because whenever our brain determines that the environment is dangerous, fight or flight response is activated, right? So our whole physiology changes. And this is not happening because we are even realizing it's not like because it happened. The general understanding of the brain is there's something dangerous outside that can put us to sympathetic activation for long periods of time, which we may feel more agitated, more frustrated, anxious, angry. You would see a lot of people in this, like they are showing their anger in different ways, right? And some people feel more of an anxiety because if you're giving the fight response, you're going to experience more anger. If you're giving the fear response, you're going to experience more of an anxiety. And then there's a sense of restlessness, agitation, and your frustration. And when you are in sympathetic activation, that part of the nervous system is active, the stories we tell ourselves change as well. We talked about the power of stories before. So when our physiology function in this way, our stories goes like, people suck, I suck, life sucks, right? There's this negative spin on thing, and there's more kind of we feel more jaded and judgmental of other people, or judgmental ourselves, judgmental our situation. So we see things from a more negative filter. because our brain is focused on dangers at this time. It's scanning for dangers, the source of that danger, so that it can deal with it. So it tends to perceive neutral things as dangerous.
So just so that I understand, just so that I follow along, it's that because we're very, very hyper aware or looking for something that's dangerous, our brain decides that things are more dangerous than they actually are, is what you're saying.
Yeah. If, for example, if we see in that state, if we see a neutral human face, there's no specific emotion portrayed, it's just very neutral.
Yep.
You will see anger or some negative emotion there, even if it's a neutral face. And if you show the same exact picture when their physiological state is changed, they will see that face differently, the emotion in that face.
Got it.
So, and that's because, again, this is a survival game, and our system evolved to err on the side of safety. It's okay to be wrong, that in the sense that, oh, I thought you were dangerous, but you were not. I won't die because of that mistake. But if you were dangerous and I didn't understand that in nature, I can die for our ancestors, not right now, but that misjudgment would be very costly. It would cost my life. So the brain works in a way, that nervous system works in a way that it errs on the side of safety. So I would rather be wrong that you were dangerous than being wrong that you were safe. Does that make sense?
Got it. So does that mean that when people are there's some people out there who are just judgmental, right? You know what I mean? They just have this view that everybody sucks, right? And I guess some people will call them pessimists, right? Or others would call them comedians. Would they be people who just think the world's after them, if that's why they have this view?
Yes, and I think it's a circular system. So your stories, you may adapt it from your family, the type of stories people tell. You can learn it from your parents and environment, what type of stories to tell about life and yourself and others. And if your stories are negative or pessimist, obviously your system is going to react to that with the desire to protect itself. So it activates the fight or flight system more frequently if you write negative stories. And when your sympathetic system is activated, so your fight or flight system is on, you're more likely to write negative stories. And the more negative stories, the more activation of the sympathetic nervous system, more negative stories, more activation, so you can get into that vicious cycle and turn there for a long time. So, and that becomes almost like a personality. You say, that this is this kind of a person because they've been using that pattern for a long time. I don't think it's a part of personality. It's just that network use, that circle use over a long periods of time.
Got it. And then you typically, before thinking negatively, when you're in that mode where you're highly alert, what typically brings you into that situation? Is it just a foreign environment, or is it stories that that brings you into that mode where you're constantly assessing everything as a threat?
Yeah, brain looks at a lot of things. Yes, the stories you tell yourself can create definitely a more vigilant, assessment of the situation. Again, the stories you tell about what's going on in the world, and if those are very fear creating environments, which politicians use that usually intentionally to do that, because it's very easy to manipulate people once you put them in sympathetic activation, meaning the fight or flight zone. Right. Because when we are there, we cannot use our critical thinking properly. That part of the brain that does the critical thinking is not functioning fully. The glucose and oxygen is taken away from those areas when we are in fight or flight. And we are focused on danger, so it's super easy to manipulate people in a place of fear or anger. So creating stories of also national level stories or global level stories that you see around creates an increased level of fight or flight response. So bringing that back to the pandemic, so the existence of a virus that can make you sick or that can kill you or that can kill your loved ones is number one, is a situation, a prime situation where your brain is going to assess a serious level of risk and put you in fight or flight mode, right? On its own. And on top of it, there are, depending on your political views and who you're listening, you may hear a lot of negative stories, like how we are doomed, like things are terrible in the news, like go to your Facebook news, what do you call it, newsfeed, or go to the news. You can hear all these stories of things are bad and it can get worse. That can create also a lot of sympathetic activation, meaning
Right.
the fight or flight activation. On top of it, we are locked in our homes. So we cannot live in the way we used to live. So there's a sense of limitation. And that feeling of feeling trapped can actually activate another system, the dorsal vagal system, the collapse system. When you're trapped, you cannot fight or run away, right? Let's say you fell in a hole and you cannot get out of that hole. What will happen? You cannot run, fight anything. You cannot run away from it. And you're super vulnerable for a predator to come and just pick you up from there. And in that case, for, like this is like millions-year-old response for an animal, for an organism, it's better to be like dead so that the predator doesn't come and find you, and give a collapsed response to that, to feeling trapped. So that sense of feeling trapped can activate another system, which is the collapse, shutdown, dissociate, numb yourself type of system that we associate with burnout even more. So I think fight or flight system is very difficult, but like if we stay in fight or flight system for a long time and combined with feeling trapped, it can trigger kind of more burnout type of systems when we feel like I can't deal with this. I can't go on like this. Like I don't have energy to deal with this. And then we want to numb ourselves, we just dissociate. So in collapse states, there's more of a feeling of numbness and dissociation, whereas in fight or flight, you're either anxious or angry or fearful. So there's very different emotional profiles. So, and I see a lot of people, they are hanging on in the fight or flight, frustrated, agitated, anxious, angry, and then sometimes they drop in a collapse state where they start feeling, I can't deal with this anymore. They just want to numb themselves. They're not very responsive. They don't want to really connect with the world and with others, which I would call more of a burnout space. So another thing I think makes pandemic-related environment more prime for burnout is the lack of social engagement for especially people who may be living alone and they are not having enough interactions, or people who cannot be with their family to protect them and stuff like that. Because one way our system activates the safety state is through co-regulation with people that we trust.
Co-regulation with people we trust. Okay, we'll talk about that. What does that mean?
Yeah. So, okay, if you think about it, actually, social engagement is another form of defense strategy.
Social engagement is a form of defense strategy. Okay.
Okay, I'll explain more.
Right.
So, it's obvious how fight or flight response is a defense strategy, right? And there is a danger, I'll fight it, I'll run away from it, I'll survive. That's a defense strategy, obvious.
Right. Or I'll play dead. Right.
Or I'll play dead. I'll shut down so that the predator doesn't, come after me. Right. And if they don't see me, like I'll just freeze so that I'm not going to be noticeable. That's obvious. So how is social engagement a defense strategy? Any ideas?
How social engagement and defense strategy? The question becomes a defense strategy against what? So like a predator? Are we talking about others and predators? Because that makes sense. If it's against predators or if against like another tribe that's also fighting for resources, a social engagement strategy would be that's greater power in numbers. So that I understand.
Yeah.
Also, if we're talking about other types of threats, say threats against famine, threats against, famine, right? So it's resources. So a social strategy means more that there's more safety in terms of shared resources.
Yeah.
I can see it in those senses.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about in a pandemic, I mean,
Not pandemic. I'm not talking about today. We didn't evolve in this environment, so we're not even talking about this right now. We're talking about in terms of our ancestors and the hunter-gatherer and how they lived and what it meant to be, what meant to them. So social engagement for our ancestors is obviously a very important defense strategy. If you look at us as an animal, we're not very fast. We don't have really sharp claws or teeth, anything that makes us like a top predator like, right? And our babies are super vulnerable for a long periods of time. They are born premature. They cannot walk, run, do anything when they are born. It takes them a year or two to just do the basic, simple, activities. The way that we protected ourselves was through engaging with each other. Imagine our ancestors. There is a tiger, there's a human being, right? One. What's the likelihood of survival for that one human being?
Not very well. But then if you have more people.
If there is one tiger, 100 people, what is the risk percentage of one person?
And a lot less, for sure.
Yeah, it's not even 1% because it's likely that the humans are going to kill the tiger, so nobody is going to die, right? So your likelihood of death is less than 1% now, where it was like maybe 95% before.
Right.
So when we are co-regulating with people that we trust, we feel safe with, just their presence lowers the danger level for nervous system and brain, so you don't react the same stimulus the same way. So what normally can activate my fight or flight response may not when I'm with the people that I feel safe with and that trust. Does that make sense?
That does, yeah. That makes sense. That's why people just feel good. That explains a lot of why people just feel good when some people are around, even though nothing's happening, because it just makes them feel safe. Why does it make them feel safe? Because, got it.
Yeah. So co-regulation is super important to be in the safe state. It can put us into the safety, ventral vagal activation, where we are more relaxed, happier, alert in the sense that focused. And we have a wider perspective. Our critical thinking is working. Our creativity is working. So all the cognitive skills that we use at work are fully usable when we feel safe. So when the ventral vagal is active. And also, we are in this state, we are more open to engaging with other people's collaboration, cooperation, and all that stuff happens in the safety state. But when we go down the ladder of the nervous system, autonomic nervous system, we start losing that, right? So think about it as a ladder. At the top, you have ventral vagal, this safety system. One down is fight or flight, sympathetic system. And one down is dorsal vagal, which is the shutdown, collapse. Right? It's like a ladder. The more down you go, right, to come back up to the safety, you travel back up the same distance. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Makes sense.
And what helps us to climb back on that ladder, one of the things that help us is the co-regulation. So, and obviously co-regulation is much more impactful when you're in person. But it still works through sound and also video as well. And I think one of the things I can already recommend people doing is having these high quality time and conversations through phone or video, but I would make them really high quality conversation, not like the big parties, Zoom parties are okay too. But having those kind of engagements a part of our lives, even when we cannot do it in person, is very important, because that co-regulation is going to take us up the ladder towards that feelings of safety. So, but of course, not having much abilities for socialization right now limits our ability to co-regulate. So it makes us more prone for burning out as well right now in the pandemic situation. And again, and if you feel trapped in where you are, then another system may start get activated. Again, dorsal vagal shut down, because to feeling trapped, we usually respond with collapse response. And I can even feel the difference, because I've been isolating in nature and in like a 5,000 square foot house, like this big space, and I didn't feel locked in at all, because I was in the woods. Like I can just get out and do whatever I want. There were no people around. So I didn't even feel that, like what locked in feels. And now I'm back in San Francisco in the apartment, and then you're in the city, and you're spending most of your time in the apartment, and that can start creating this like sensations of trappedness, even though I know like I didn't change as a person, my mental patterns didn't change, but I already feel my physiological responses and nervous system state responding completely differently when I'm here versus when I'm in the woods.
I see. Very interesting. And then has anybody talked to you about when they felt, I mean, I could see them go into fight or flight with feelings of anger and stuff like that. So if in a situation where people feel trapped, especially during the times of pandemic, in other words, you feel trapped, their dorsal vagal is activated, what are the symptoms of what happens? Do they feel like they're tired all the time? And I'm only asking also because for myself, because I've been tired all the time, more tired than I should be, even though I'm having a lot of sleep, right?
So when you go to dorsal vagal, there is the sense of fatigue, exhaustion, feeling tired, feeling numbness, and sometimes it can be the feelings of hopelessness or even shame if it happened because of a personal thing, because shame can put us into collapse as well. But in pandemic, it wouldn't be shame related, but it can be like losing hope in certain circumstances. Feeling trapped would put you there, and then you would feel, again, a sense of hopelessness. In certain cases, it's just like numbness, not caring, like losing that motivation, care you have for things that you would normally have, and a disconnection from the world and from others, not wanting to connect and being inside your own mind, was feeling like a distance there, right, with you and with the world, as if there's like a wall.
Right.
And yeah, and physiologically speaking, what changes in your body when you're in dorsal vagal in the collapse mode is the physiological functioning is shutting down as well. Everything is slowing down. Thinking slows down. Heart rate slows down. Breathing slows down. The function, like your digestive system is not really functioning. The reproductive system is not really functioning. So everything, all the functioning of the body, physiological functions, is taking to minimize mode, to conserve as much metabolic resources as it can. So also, in the States, we may feel a little stupid. It's hard to read, hard to understand, hard to listen to people. Our social engagement system is off, so it's very difficult to like even care what people are saying, hard to listen and focus in that point. And that's, in the work context, it will be like waking up in the morning and not really feeling like I cannot work right now. I cannot go to work. Like I don't want to go to work. I don't want to face the people. I can't do it anymore. It's like that feeling of, that seems like a more of a collapse.
So in this situation, I guess within the pandemic and within a different version of burnout, which is pretty much diagnosed when you enter in dorsal vagal, what do you do in that situation?
Number one, I have to say something about when you say it's diagnosed with dorsal vagal. It is normally not. There's usually a self-assessed report, like this framework that I'm talking about, Burnout, is actually a framework I created based on the polyvagal theory.
Got it.
This model is not used on the Burnout, but that's the model I created. And my, my belief is that this is the physiological aspect of what's going on and why we're experiencing those symptoms, is explaining it from a physiological perspective, from a nervous system perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are those two questions? So you're asking what we can do about it?
Yeah, what are the solutions to do about it, though? So say, for example, like, we're all burnt out, and one of the things that we feel is that we just feel sluggish. We're getting sleep, but we're not getting sleep because we're suddenly in high alert because we feel trapped, right? That's probably why we're not getting enough sleep for some of us, I assume, correct?
Yeah, if you're in fight or flight, like it's a danger place, you may not get high quality sleep because you may be waking up multiple times throughout the night because your brain wants to keep you in a lighter sleep, because in the deep sleep you may not realize the danger for, like, again, our nervous system evolved for hunter-gatherer world style. Like, it doesn't work in a way that, like, I'm locked in my apartment, nothing can happen. So it still thinks we are in nature and exposed to predators right now. So it will monitor in a way that to make you be more responsive if something were to happen. So your sleeping would be really light, so you won't get into deep sleep as much. So your sleep quality will be much lower, and you don't wake up as rested and replenished because of that.
Yeah,
So it can
that
affect
makes
the sleep that way. So what we can do about it? Number one is, also this is one of the reasons pandemic can cause burnout symptoms, is the perceived lack of control. I feel like I'm not controlling the pandemic. If I can go outside, to wear a mask, not wear a mask, and stuff like that, right? So there's this sense of lack of control.
right.
Humans respond to the sense of lack of control by, again, either fight or flight or collapse. And people have different sense of control. In psychology, we talk about internal locus of control versus external locus of control. Some people have stories about life and themselves in a way that I have control over my outcomes. Even though I cannot control everything that's happening around the world, there are things I can control that's going to determine my outcomes. That's internal locus of control. And what my outcomes depend on is me, what I'm going to make with what I have. Versus external locus of control refers to the type of stories people have. It's life, it's fate, it's about because of other people, it's because of the government, it's the external factors. My outcome is because of the external factors. And there's not much I can do about it. It's because my parents treated me this way, I'm this way, and I cannot do anything about it.
Right.
So it's an external locus of control, meaning that those kind of stories put the control to external situation. And if it's that, like, of course, I'm going to feel powerless and helpless.
Yeah.
And it's going to put me more in a shutdown place, right? Like, if I'm trapped, like I cannot do anything, I don't have control over this situation, I'm more likely to experience collapse states. Whereas internal locus of control, even in the pandemic, even if I'm shut down in my house, internal locus of control people will say, okay, what am I going to do with this small freedom that I have? Not trying to necessarily change the external circumstance, but finding what they can control in the environment that they are in. They are focusing less on what's going on and more on what they can do with their time during pandemic, for example.
Now, when you're saying what they can control, are we talking about it could be anything, or are we talking about something related? So, for example, there's a lot of people who feel like they can't breathe because they always have this restriction with their mask, or they're losing their job, or they're stuck inside. Like, could it be anything, or like they play video games or something like that, where they can control the character, or what? Like, or does it have to be semi-related, which is like autonomy, like they can control, I don't know, something else, right? Like,
Yeah.
how related does it have to be to the loss of control?
So
Or
there's some loss of control. Yeah, we cannot wish away the virus right now, and we cannot expect everything to go back to exactly what it was before. Certain things have to change, and we don't have individual control over that.
right.
But there are a lot of things we can control. I can control what I'm gonna do when I'm at home, how I'm gonna work, do I utilize my time, what kind of meaning do I give to this process. So
Hmm.
if you say, like, for example, I lost quite a substantial amount of income because of the pandemic related, because some of my clients were hit badly, number one,
Hmm.
because their business was based on things that had to be in person, and their revenue took a big hit. And of course, like, they had to tighten the budget. That's one type. And also I had to cancel all in-person programs that I'm doing, and in-person full day
Right.
processes I ran. So, and that's a substantial part of my income, right?
Hmm.
And
Right.
when that happened, I could have said, oh my God, like, because of this, and there's nothing I can do about it. But instead of that, I started thinking about, okay, that happened. I cannot control that. I'm not even worried about that. Like, that's not something I should be worried about. What I'm worried about is, how am I going to utilize this period, right? This frees up more time, what kind of projects I'm going to put in it for future, so I can use this as an investment for future and build the things that I always wanted to build, and
Hmm.
play around with stuff that I don't normally have time for. Or it can be just not work related. It can be just like, okay, maybe I want to take more time off and enjoy my life more and work less in this time and environment. So
I see.
it's the focus is about what I can do right now, and the best way to utilize this. So I don't really have much time about thinking about, oh, like, this sucks that this is happening outside. So how you use your focus. The good news is you can change your focus, right? If you are an external locus person, you can practice uh, creating more control in your life, have a mindset shift. And for those people, if you feel like that you may be externally
External locus.
oriented person, a good book to read that I mentioned before is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Because if this guy could have an internal locus of control and Auschwitz, I think we all can do it. When we are isolating during pandemic, doesn't seem as dire to that situation. So it's doable under the harshest situation, where people normally have the least amount of control. When you're in a Nazi camp, they didn't have much control over what was going to happen, but he still found a lot of control. So even if there's nothing to control in our environment, we have the control of our reactions to that environment. That's
Right.
one thing we always have control. We can choose our reaction,
Right.
and what kind of narratives we're going to write about that situation. So that's very important. Pay attention to your stories.
Yeah,
And
and it seems related to it as well, because we're talking. I mean, you're talking about um, like, in the situation you lost your income, but you're able to turn it into more free time and doing things you want. It's almost like you're reframing your source of potential anxiety to something more positive. So you're kind of taking that into control, right? As opposed to a distraction, you're turning that on its head.
yeah, and I really enjoyed myself during these last few months, because the way I looked at it is like, okay, the question to ask is, what are the opportunities in this situation, regardless of what the situation is. Always ask yourself, what are the opportunities? You always want to look at the risks, obviously, and create an action plan if they were to happen, worst case scenarios. Have your action plan, make that ready, put it aside. Then rest of the time, always look at the opportunities. My life motto, I always say, shit happens, turn it to fertilizer. When shit happens in your life, in the world, and it's like, okay, how am I going to turn this shit into fertilizer to grow things?
Right.
Right? If you have this perspective, your stories are going to be different. So if you find yourself writing these stories and it is given, the control is given to external situations, and it's like times like, oh, maybe I should change the story, right? That's reframing is of utmost importance. And other thing that we discussed last time that I think is super beneficial is the gratitude practice or appreciation practice. And even when the things that are happening are not ideal and tough, if we know how to look at it, there's always something to appreciate, right? And if we can develop that muscle, it will help us to get the safety zone. Because if I were able to appreciate something, grateful for something, my brain and nervous system takes it as, oh, like I have something good happening right now. And guess where it puts us? Back to safety activation, right? Then we come up in the ladder of that autonomic nervous system activation, so that I can be in a place where I can use my mental skills better. I will feel happier, more satisfied. There's a sense of okayness, and I'll be able to engage with other people easily. So it's kind of a hack. Developing gratitude is a hack that will change our nervous system activation. Co-regulating with people that we feel safe with, that we trust, is another hack to change our state. Mm-hmm. And joy practice, I call it joy practice. Doing things during your day, the small things that gives you joy. And they are usually very personal, right? Like for some people, it can be a certain type of music. When they put it, they feel a sense of joy. For me, for example, flowers. I love flowers. Just having a flower that I see, it adds joy to my life. Those are like these little shifts in my system, because if I can feel the sensation of joy, guess which part of the nervous system it activates? The safety system.
Safety system, that's right.
Right? Again, things that give you joy. Just if you need to watch kitten YouTube videos, do that, right? If it gives you joy to look at little kittens playing. Whatever it is for you, like you need to fill your day with little simple joys. It doesn't have to be big things. And I think like a good coffee, the smell of a freshly brewed coffee can give joy to someone, then do that. If it's cooking, do that. And if you fill your days with that, it's easier to, even if things happen that take us down the ladder, these things will help us to go back up the ladder. And that's why I think it's also important to visualize having this life energy bar. Mm-hmm. And if it's going down, think about replenishing it. What does replenish your internal, resource level, right? Think about that. Those things, when you do them, you start feeling better. I call them replenishers. Have a less of replenishers and do them more. And because when you do that, replenishers, probably they're filling you up because they are taking you to ventral vagal to safety state. And pay attention to the drainers. What do you do and you feel like your energy drained? If you're on your Facebook and then afterwards you feel like your life energy levels getting drained, obviously don't do that. It drains you. Minimize doing the things that drains your energy and maximize, the things that replenishes your energy. And I think also one last thing that is very important for people, especially with children, isolating with children because they have a completely different experience than most of us do. They also have to deal with demand overload. They have to work from home. Usually they have to deal with the kids. They have to cook, clean, do the house chores. So there's a lot of demands in that lifestyle and can be very difficult. So, and we experience demand overload at work as well. And it's one of the main factors creating burnout at the workplace, where people like demands keep coming and, I'm doing my best to respond. I'm overworked responding, but I'm still behind and it doesn't feel like it's ever going to end, and it can give a sense of hopelessness. You're chasing something you cannot catch and it's never enough, and it can make you freeze and collapse. So I think one thing to help with that is thinking about what is essential and what is trivial in your life and in your work. And especially at a time like that, where we have demands from our work, there's a pandemic going on, like life is tough, and people may have economic concerns as well, financial concerns as well. And we are expecting an economic crash soon and stuff like that. So I think in this time, it's important to be, number one, self-compassionate, but also see this as a great opportunity to force us to see what's essential in our lives and trivial in our
Mm-hmm.
lives. What's essential in our work to do and trivial in the work to do, and just do the essentials and don't worry about the trivials. We don't have to do everything. We don't have to respond all the demands. That's one of the mistakes that we are doing. As the demands are coming and we feel like we should be able to respond to all of this. Guess what? You cannot. Demands are gonna always increase. They will never decrease. And your capacity to respond to them is not gonna increase like that. It may decrease. So that's an impossible game to win. The only way you can win that game is when the demands come in and you look at all the demands. No, I don't have to respond to all of you. Which one of you are important? I'm going to only respond to those few things, and I'm just going to let the other ones go. We don't have to do it all. Right? So, and yeah, like if you have kids at home that you're doing and you're still working, let go of the expectation of becoming a super mom. Right? Like, let go of the expectation of responding to everything. And at work, it's also crucial. What is the essentials of your work or business? Find those and just worry about those things and cut the rest. It's better for the business as well, not just your self-regulation and dealing with burnout. It's the quality of your product is going to be better if you know how to focus on your essential or the essentials of your service or essentials of your job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. This is great advice. Really good takeaway about one, first identifying that getting into collapse mode is something that can happen outside of work, and to actually know that it's actually important, and to get around that is to turn that sense of helplessness into something empowering, and to also take breaks in between, to also do things to replenish that bar, as you say, in order to fend off getting into that mode, because that mode, the trade-off can be quite severe for a very long time. Yeah. So, I mean, we're seeing that kind of that shift happen, that like the effects of happening on a macro level, but on a micro level, we can take these steps to first identify it and to do things, to turn these things into opportunities in order to avoid further problems down the road.
And if I were to recommend something structured, what people can do, like gratitude journaling is a great one, as I said. Every day, writing down 3 things that they are grateful for, but changing it every day. Don't write the same thing, every other day, like, for my health, for my family, no, every day you have to find something new to write, right? You cannot use the same thing again.
That's right.
And then add to that, what can I control today? Especially if you're feeling like lack of control, if you're suffering from that sense of being trapped and you not liking the situation, I think one thing is to write down the things that you can control today, that you can do. So that's going to shift your focus, what you can control today, and how can you influence your day today. And that's going to build a sense of control over the situation. I think, and do the things that give you joy. And, take it easy. Don't try to do everything. Just focus on the essentials and let the other ones go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
those would be the easiest practical ways of doing it. And also cognitive reframing, if people are interested, they can go and look at online how to use.
That's gratitude, right? Cognitive reframing. So that's what gratitude does, right? You reframe things cognitively.
Yeah, gratitude is all different. You're creating an emotion of gratitude through remembering like what good things you have in life, like you're paying attention to the good. It's more of a focus practice.
Mm-hmm.
We focus on the things that we have and that are good, that changes that creates the emotion of gratitude, that changes our nervous system state. Cognitive reframing can be used for anything. It's like a mental flexibility exercise. Is about, if you're saying, what is the story you're writing about this, in being in pandemic, being isolated, all these stories, cognitive reframing is going to allow you to write different stories.
Right.
Practicing writing different stories that we tell about what's going on and about ourselves, the narratives that we have about the situation. And the more reframing we can do,
Mm-hmm.
the more options we have and the healthier we will have. And one cognitive reframing here is, for example, external locus control versus internal. So change your story from, there's nothing I can do, I cannot control this sucks, is write a different story. Yes, this is going on and that's out of my control, but these are the things I can control and I can utilize this. These are my opportunities here. That's also cognitive reframing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Great. That's awesome, Banu. Yeah, this is awesome advice, and I think something that we can all take away. Burnout's a huge topic, and the first thing to do is identify, and the second is, I guess, cognitive reframing. And there's many ways to do it, and as well as constantly getting that bar to get back up.
Yeah, I think the useful metaphor is always know where you are in your life energy bar. If it's going down, do the thing that increases it, and pay attention to what increases it and what drains it, right? And regulate yourself. I think that's very simple conceptualization, but it's super effective. And don't let it to go to red. If you're approaching red, just stop and make sure you're replenishing that part. Don't go to red.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you. This has been a fantastic talk. And I guess we'll see everybody next week.
Yes. See you guys next week.